Hi, I'm Jane.
I'm Maggie Banda. I'm the Executive Director of Women's Legal Resources Center, Warwick, based in Malawi. I'm also the originator of Women's Manifesto in Malawi. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Dalgety. I'm a writer now. I do a weekly column in The Scotsman, our national newspaper, and I am a long-time colleague and friend of Maggie's. And I have to say, over the last nearly 20 years now, Maggie, I have learnt a lot about women's rights and women's empowerment, about the work that she and her sisters do in Malawi.
And I'm Bex.
And we are
Insightful Sisters.
Hi, everybody. We're lucky tonight. We're doing an international episode. We're in 4 countries. Bex is in Scotland. Maggie is in Malawi. I'm in boring old Yorkshire. And Susan is in America. So there's across 3 continents, 4 countries. So with us tonight, we've got Maggie Banda. And Maggie is the founder and executive director of the Women's Legal Resource Centre, which is Malawi's leading women's rights NGO. And she's also the driving force and founder of the Women's Manifesto movement in Malawi. Hello, Maggie. And we've also got with us Maggie's friend and colleague, Susan Dalgety. Second time on Insightful Sisters for Susan. Thank you, Susan. Susan is a journalist and writer. She writes regularly for Scotland. She's co-edited The Women Who Wouldn't Wished alongside Lucy Hunter Blackburn. And she's written a book called The Spirit of Malawi. Susan was communications officer for Scotland's First Minister at one point, and it was through that link she visited Malawi and met Maggie. So they're here to talk to us about Malawi tonight. I'm going to pass back to Bex, and she's going to ask our first few questions.
Somewhere I'd like to start is with the connection between Scotland and Malawi, because you had mentioned this last time we had you on as a guest, Susan, and I had no idea, and I imagine a lot of our listeners won't. So what is the history there? What's the connection between Scotland and Malawi?
The history of that stretches back to the time of Dr. David Livingstone, who was the first European to visit Lake Malawi back in 1859, I think. And in his wake, there were a lot of missions from the Church of Scotland, followed by the Anglican Church, Roman Catholic Church and so on, that travelled to Malawi to work on education and health primarily. So Malawi, however, became a fully independent country in 1964. That's right, isn't it, Maggie? 64?
Yes, that's right. 1964.
Yeah. So when the Scottish Parliament was set up in 1999, and the Scottish Government then wanted to do overseas development work. And I worked in the government at that time, and it was decided that the Scottish Government, Scotland, would focus on one country, and that country was Malawi, because of the long historical links that had continued throughout the 20th century into the 21st century. So there was a bilateral agreement signed between Scotland and Malawi governments in 2005. That has been refreshed at least once, so that agreement is still in place. But much more importantly, there is a network of civil society organisations, NGOs, churches, colleges, schools that work together in Scotland and Malawi, primarily to support Malawi's development, but also equally, I would say, as important is that we learn from each other. The term global citizen is bandied about all over the place by development experts. What does that mean? Well, I think what it means is what Maggie and I have got, which is a relationship that even though most of the time we're 5,000 miles away, we can learn from each other, we can work together. I started working with Maggie's team in 2009, and I am still working with Maggie's team today. So that on a different programs, but that's global citizenship. We're friends, we're sisters, and we learn from each other.
That's lovely. And so how did you two meet? What particular project was that?
Maggie?
Yes, I wanted to come in to say that as Susan rightly said, we met in 2009. So at that time, we had a new parliament because we had just gone through our elections of 2009. So we had a parliamentary women's caucus, which had new female MPs. And then Susan wanted to work with the same in terms of assisting them on how they can play their role as MPs in parliament, but also in their constituencies. So I remember the clerk of parliament of that time called me and said, there's an organization from Scotland. They want to work with you. Are you interested? So definitely we're interested. Anything to do with women, for us, it's an area of interest. So we contacted them, and then they linked us together, and we started working together from that time. And as Susan said, it has been a long-term relationship. So apart from working with women in parliament, working with women that wanted to contest in 2014 also elections, and then later on also in 2019 elections, we have also expanded to work on girls' education. So currently, Susan's foundation by the Lord McConnell is supporting us to support 200 girls in Malawi from 4 schools. So we pay their school fees, we provide school uniforms, we provide school supplies, we do mentorship sessions for girls, role model sessions for the girls. So there are so many things that we're doing together, but it started all with women's leadership issue.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Maggie.
Anything you want to add, Susan?
I think the women's leadership, and Maggie will expand on this much more than I, but women's leadership in Malawi is whether it's girls staying in school to do their secondary education, or whether it's women who contest and win a seat in the National Assembly. I think it's really important that all of us, in whatever way we can, support women and girls to develop to their best potential, both in Malawi, but also, in the global north as well.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And Maggie, in your introduction, you spoke a little bit, just sort of briefly mentioned some of the different organisations that you work within to support women and girls. What's your background? How did this career path start for you? Was this something you always wanted to do?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, yeah, quite interesting. Actually, I'll tell you this, that when I was going to college, that's University of Malawi Chancellor College, my initial vision was that I was going to be a lecturer at the university. So I was studying so hard, and I was doing sociology and demography. So that was like a degree in social science, and I passed very well. I had a credit, and then that, of course, qualified me to now apply for the position of a lecturer and all that. But I changed my mind in my second year, actually. I had gone to the field under World Vision International. So they were doing an assessment to understand what are the needs of women and girls, and then, of course, of men and boys, so that they could do now program interventions in the area. So when I went, because it was quite away from town, quite away from the city that I was living in, so I discovered that there were a lot of challenges that women were passing through.
Yeah.
So went into an area where there was literally no pipe to water, no boreholes. So people were drinking from the river, basically.
Wow.
Yes. So those are some of the things that I saw women facing, because it's women that would go and draw water for their families and all that. I also found that there was no hospital nearby where women could go with their children, under 5 children, for vaccination and all that. So then I changed my mind at that moment. I said, I want to work in an organization that is going to assist women. But I didn't know which organization anyway. So after my college, then I joined GIZ. They had a project working with the youth. So we were reaching out to the youth to provide support for them to gain vocational skills. But then later on, I joined a women's rights organization, which was called Women and Law in Southern Africa. So when I joined that organization in 2000, that's when now I understood fully in terms of what women were facing. So I discovered there were issues to do with domestic violence, issues to do with the dispossession of property when their husbands have died. There were issues to do with land dispossession. I found there were so many issues that women were dealing with. And then later on, after working for 6 years, that's when I thought of establishing an NGO that would combine legal justice issues and economic justice issues. Because one of the things that I also noted was that the women that were seeking legal justice, they also had financial issues. So they are getting divorced by their husbands, but how do they survive after that? So I saw that there was a gap and I needed to fill that gap. So that's when I now established Women's Legal Resources Center. So we have been running the center from 2006 to date. It's now 20 years. And for us, we have been focusing on gender-based violence. We have been focusing on women's access to productive resources. We have been focusing on girls' education. We have also been focusing on women's economic empowerment and also women's leadership, because we also believe that women have to be in the center of decision-making processes so that the needs of women are dealt with at that level. How I found myself in the movement. And suffice to say, I've gone beyond what I thought I would be doing, because apart from establishing Women's Legal Resources Center, then I also established Women's Manifesto Movement, because we also noted that as women, we're speaking, but isolated. So we need a united voice. So the Women's Manifesto Movement brings together women from local CSOs, international CSOs, women from the rural areas, women from the private sector, any woman, they come into the space and we discuss issues that affect women.
Amazing. And Susan, obviously, we know a fair bit about your background, but in terms of Malawi and that project, how did you find yourself, how did that come across your desk? How did you find yourself linked into it?
My relationship with Malawi started in 2005 because I worked for the then First Minister, who is now Lord Jack McConnell. And I came to Malawi, I was sent to Malawi to do a recce for the first government visit by the Scottish Government. And within a week, I knew that I was going to spend a lot of the rest of my life somehow involved with Malawi. It's such an amazingly beautiful country with warm-hearted people, but huge challenges, very significant challenges. It's probably in one of the world's bottom 5, I hate to use the word bottom, but most poverty-stricken countries. And recent events such as the Ukraine-Russia war and most definitely the blockade of Hormuz Strait have caused significant problems. And as I worked with Maggie and her team, I understood two things better than I ever would if I had just stayed working in Scotland alone. I understood how deep-rooted patriarchal attitudes and culture affect women and girls across the world, most definitely in countries where people have low incomes. And I also understood that we are, as a world, completely united. Donald Trump decides to attack Iran. That leads to the blockade of Hormuz Strait. The country that suffers most at the moment from that blockade is Malawi. Malawi cannot get the fertilizer that it depends on to grow food, to feed its people, and the country has ran out of fuel reserves. So if you can just imagine for a moment, a country of must be nearly 23 million people now, where travelling, Maggie has to travel, she will tell you, across the country for work. Her team of field officers and project officers have to travel from the town they're based in to the villages where they do their work. They need fuel to be able to do that work. There is no fuel in the country at the moment because of the blockade of Hormuz Strait. So no country is an island. The impact of what other countries, and usually big, rich countries, do immediately affects low-income countries much more than it affects, say, a country like the UK. So that's what I have learned over the last 20 years, and it's been an absolute privilege. I could also just say Maggie's too modest, but Maggie is now, in the 20 years that I have known her, nearly 20 years, I've seen her develop. She is now the leading women's rights advocate in the country. If donor or a senior parliamentarian or a member of government or somebody working in gender-based violence or women's education, whatever, they need to know something about women's rights, Maggie Banda is the woman to go to.
Amazing. I mean, an honour to speak to you, Maggie, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jane's going to speak to you in a bit about the current situation in Malawi for women and girls and their experiences today. So I am in my early 30s. I was born in the mid-90s. And I wonder, a woman my age in Malawi, what experience would she have had growing up versus today? What changes would she have seen over the course of her life?
Yeah, thank you, Becky. So many things, that's what I would say. But I think first one is that I think from the 1990s, that's when we saw a change in government. As early as 1992, 93, people started pushing for change because we were in a one-party state, dictatorship at that time. So there had been winds of change across Southern Africa, and Malawi was not spared from the same. So people started demanding a pluralistic government because they felt that human rights are not negotiable. So in 1993, then we had government that called for a referendum for people to decide whether they wanted to go the route of democracy or remain as an autocratic state. And of course, in the end, people voted for multi-party democracy. So I would say that young women who are like 30s and all that, what they have experienced really is the new Malawi, what we call the new Malawi, which was now beyond 1994. It was 1994, that's when now we had the first democratically elected president. So I'll tell you this, it's been a mixed bag in the sense that there are certain things that have worked and there are certain other things that have not worked out. So for example, just guaranteeing human rights for citizens, that has worked out very well. Because after 1994, we saw government putting in place constitutional bodies like the Human Rights Commission that is mandated to deal with issues of human rights. We saw government putting in place the Ombudsperson's office that is able to hear grievances that are concerning the public offices. We saw government putting in place the constitution itself of Malawi. It's very progressive. It has a Bill of Rights that talks about women's rights, the rights of children, and all that. So I think in that regard, we are fine. So at least people that were born after 1994, they would say they were born in a democratic country, yes, in a free society, in an open society. Because then people were able to speak out, they were able to criticize government and speak out on issues which are not going on well. But I think from the economic front, we have seen things deteriorating. So things haven't been working out the way they were working out before 1994. And I think that has been the concern of citizens. Because what people had aspired for is not what is happening. When people felt that democracy was going to bring more economic growth, better outcomes for our economy, it's not happening like that. There's been a lot of corruption. So people have grown up in a corrupt environment where it has been normalized. Yeah, so people will say, okay, we are going to do something about corruption. Government will talk about it, but that remains a lip service. We have seen access to social services going down. People go to hospitals and they can't get treatment. You go to schools of Malawi, standards have gone down. You find that people cannot trust public schools. Most people that can afford private schools, they will rather send their children to private schools. So the rural dwellers, for example, people that are from poor households, then it means that already you are differentiating their lifestyles. Yeah, and then that also has impact in terms of what they can access in future. For me, I just look at even my own children. They are going to private schools. They are getting exposed. They are able to compete at global level. But what happens to those that are going to public schools? It's not the same scenario. And for young women growing in our context right now, there's a lot of empowerment that they need to be given so that they're able to survive. And then there are issues to do with gender-based violence, issues to do with child marriage, issues to do with poor maternal health, all that linked together. I would say it's not a good environment at the moment for young women like you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving that sort of history and that context. Susan, what about yourself? I mean, what changes have you seen in the country over the 21 years that you've been visiting?
Just to say that absolutely everything that Maggie has said and to give the context of the size, the scale of the problem, but 80% of the population live in the rural areas, and they survive by growing food, selling any surplus, and small trading. The people who have good jobs, private education, whatever, who live in the cities, their life, as Maggie has described, is completely different to what the majority of women and girls experience. I have seen Maggie's absolutely right. It's the economic development of Malawi that is the huge challenge. Malawi's Bill of Rights, Constitution, its Freedom of Information Act, all the framework for a multi-party democracy are in place and are used. It's only a couple of years ago that The Economist said that Malawi was Country of the Year in the way that it had dealt with contested presidential elections. So it has a very mature democracy. There are always very straightforward handovers of power after each election. Malawi is probably, I would argue, the most peaceful country in the world. They have not a history of conflict with countries outside, nor does it have very little history of internal violent conflict. It's a very peaceful nation. But economically, it really struggles. It's a landlocked country, so it's very difficult to export anything. It's also expensive to import. And until about 20 years ago, it was largely dependent on tobacco for export and to bring in foreign exchange, which of course is required to buy things like fertilizer and fuel and other necessities of modern life. Tobacco industry has collapsed the world over, rightly from a public health point of view, but from Malawi's point of view, it was a disaster. And they have not been able, for many reasons, not least climate, to find another industry on that scale. And just to touch on climate, just as wars started by presidents of the United States affect Malawi more than they affect the UK, so climate change affects Malawi more than it affects the UK. People in Malawi have died because of climate change, because of the change in the weather, because in the southern region the land is degraded so people can't grow crops to the same level that they used to, and children are malnourished. If a child is malnourished, they do not learn at school as well as they should. It's a vicious cycle. So I'm one person, I don't have any answers, but I think both in households, economic justice is what is required, but also the country needs economic justice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting to get that sort of economic background and to understand, how an industry failing 20 years ago, just to see how that follows through. I'm sure, within the UK, we can think of examples where industries have collapsed and it's been absolutely devastating to the communities built up around them. So that provides some really interesting context into the background of where Malawi has been and the direction things have been going in. What I'll do is I will pass over to Jane to sort of dig a bit deeper into how things are now and where things hopefully are going in the future.
Hello, both. So paint us a picture of what it's like to live in a village. A great deal of the space is taken up by Lake Malawi. It's obviously a very important feature. Are there mountainous areas and plains? Tell us a little bit about the countryside.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So Malawi is predominantly rural, because 75% of the population lives in the rural areas. So what it means is that we don't have a lot of urbanization. So people that are living in urban areas are about 25% of the population. So it's quite dependent on the rural dwellers for so many things. I would say that in terms of topography of Malawi, it's mixed also. We have some places that are highlands, places that are also low-lying areas. One of the key features of Malawi is our lake. We have lakes, we have rivers, which also attracts a lot of tourism in that regard. But suffice to say that most of the rural dwellers are subsistence subsistence farmers. So when they are farming, the crops they are growing is mostly maize, just for bare survival. So, and then mostly like in southern region of Malawi, those are not districts for many cash crops. We have tea in southern Malawi as a cash crop in some 2 districts. Then in the central Malawi is predominantly a tobacco farming area. So we have commercial farmers operating in central Malawi who are growing tobacco. And then we have also commercial companies operating in southern Malawi growing tea and, of course, sugar. So I would say that in terms of citizens participating in economic growth, it has been very minimal because most of the citizens, at least for those that are dwelling in the rural areas, they are mostly into subsistence farming. So I think that's how we are almost like captured. And then in terms of employment, now in the urban centers, it's estimated that only 15 to 20% of our population is in formal employment. So that the 20% is the one that is being taxed, government to survive. So that brings in a lot of pressure on the 20% of the population, the rest of the population for them to survive. So that's how we are.
So the life of a girl growing up in a city will be very different.
It's very different. It's very different from those in the rural areas. Maybe we can talk about just access to education, for example. In rural areas, people have to walk long distances for them to get to the nearest school. At least for primary schools, they are in walkable distances. But secondary schools, high schools, they are mostly far from where people are staying. Some people would cover like maybe 10 kilometers going to school and another 10 kilometers coming back home. So that itself is a challenge for women. And sometimes if you find that women will drop out, girls will drop out of school, not because they don't want school, but it has become a hazard for them to walk all that distance. And then even access to other social services, it's very difficult in the rural areas than in the urban areas. And that's why you find that sometimes girls would just drop out of school to get married because that is what is there. That is what is there, basically. Yeah.
Is there an enthusiasm to get to school?
Yeah, I would say that yes, there's enthusiasm that people want to remain in school, but sometimes the challenges that I'm talking about are the ones that will hinder. But what we have also done as organizations, even us working with Susan, we have been doing mentorship programs for girls so that they're able to see that there's life beyond the rural areas where they're staying. But sometimes they don't know what is there outside the world. So they'll need to have someone that will tell them, okay, when you get educated, this is what you can achieve. This is what you can reach out to. So they need also like role models that they can look to and say, I want to be like this, be like teachers. And mostly they will be male teachers. So that wouldn't speak a lot about what women can do. So for us as our program, we have also been doing a lot of coaching, a lot of mentorship, a lot of role models so that they know that there's more to life than what they are experiencing in their villages.
You said that the society is quite patriarchal. Do the girls carry a lot of the household chores? I mean, that will stop you getting to school, won't it? If you've got to, I don't know, feed animals or look after crops or look after smaller children.
Okay, that is also another element that girls are also expected to help out in the reproductive roles. So they will help in terms of fetching water. They will help in terms of going maybe to a maize mill so that they can grind their maize. They will help in terms of going to the nearest hospital with a young child. They will help out with chores that are around the household. So that affects their time, which they can then commit to their education. So they are tired, they will not study. And when they are not studying, it means that they will not perform well in school. And then people say, oh, girls are not performing, but because of all these issues that they have to be dealing with. So there have been some initiatives of building hostels for girls, even in schools that are supposed to be day schools. So different programs are being put in place to construct hostels for girls so that if they can be taken away from their homes and remain in those hostels, they can have more time for study and be able to perform well in class.
Does that mean you sometimes have to actually persuade the whole family that it is going to be useful in the long term to them to get this girl to school?
Actually, there's a lot of awareness raising that has to be done for families to understand the importance of educating girls. So much as they will say, oh, we know we are sending our girls to school. But if they don't understand that if you don't create time for them to study, for parents to understand the importance of giving time to the girls, the importance of not marrying the girls away. Because sometimes it is parents that will marry off the girls because they are looking for money. Like in northern Malawi, we have some 2 districts where they will marry off girls because they are looking for money as a family. So
Do they
there's
get
a lot.
Dowry? Is there a
Yes,
dowry
dowry, yes.
system?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done for parents to be able to appreciate and make girls remain in school.
And, looking at it from the parents and the family's point of view, you can see that they think of the whole and not of that particular girl, but it's hard on the girls. What sort of careers are girls coming into now that they didn't perhaps when you were younger?
Okay, so people will go for careers which they normally see. In rural areas, we have seen that mostly people will talk about teaching, they will talk about nursing, because these are at least the professions which they are seeing all the time. But in the urban centers, things have really changed. Girls have gone into non-traditional fields.
Mm-hmm.
Girls have become engineers. Girls have become lawyers. These are non-traditional fields which people never thought about. Girls have gone into so many IT, all that. Yes. So it's opening up, but mostly for the urban centers because they have information. They know what they can apply for example, at O level. Because that is also another thing. We have seen that like in the rural areas, people can pass very well at O level. But if they don't have information in terms of which courses are available, which universities are available. Some have actually not even applied for any university because they don't have the information. But for urban centers, we have seen that people have gone into non-traditional fields because information is available and then they know exactly where they can go and apply for the same. So as things are changing in the urban centers, we hope that things will also change in the rural settings.
Yeah, those are the role models of the future, aren't they?
Yes.
You mentioned the danger of girls walking to school. So sexual violence against women a big problem in Malawi?
It's a big problem. Actually, it's estimated that 1 in 3 people would have experienced gender-based violence of different form. So whether it's economic violence or physical violence or sexual violence. Indeed, issues of gender-based violence are a huge issue for girls as they go to school, as they come back, but even within the schools. We have laws in place right now. So the penal code was actually reformed so that it could provide for stiffer punishment for rape and for child rape. We also have a Prevention of Domestic Violence Act that provides protection, not just for married couples, but for anyone who is within the domestic setting. So it means that girls will also fall into that category. So those are some of the laws that have been put in place to protect people from gender-based violence. And then we have also structures in place. Like in the police service, we have victim support units, which survivors can go to and seek support. But it's just that sometimes the challenge remains with the actual implementation of the laws. Because you find that even the structures, though they would understand that there are laws in place, they would also have challenges sometimes to implement the laws. So you find that in circumstances where they're not even supposed to be mediating, they will mediate on gender-based violence cases. And then we're saying, no, these are just issues that need to go to the court and not for mediation. So we also have challenges in terms of how the service providers themselves also provide the services. But otherwise, at least the legal framework, the policy framework is available for use.
And is it more, the police framework, is that more difficult to operate in rural areas? I'm imagining I'm imagining that it's quite difficult, for example, to travel far or quickly in rural areas.
It is difficult because For the victim support units that I'm talking about, they are mostly at the district center. So they are at the police station, which is at the district center. But then it means that if you are living away from the district center, you need to find transport for you to travel to that nearest victim support unit. They have tried through the Ministry of Gender to come up with what they are calling community victim support units, but they also have their own issues because of staffing, resources, and all that. So for normal victim support services, you'll find them mostly at the district center. So obviously, there are issues to do with accommodation, issues to do with transport for them to get to the nearest support services.
I imagine that makes it difficult, for example, to get healthcare as well.
Yes, it does. It does. Okay, so if we look at the policies that we have, in terms of accessing health services, it talks about within a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers. So they would need to have like a health center or a health hospital. But then in reality, that is not happening in that way. So people still have to cover long distances for them to get to the nearest health center or the nearest hospital. And then the second thing now is about the services. Now, when they go, are the services available? That is also another challenge altogether. People not get the actual services which they are looking for because the health sector is also challenged in terms of resourcing. With the funding cuts that we have experienced, Malawi government has been struggling to finance the health sector because of limited resources and all that. So even in terms of the services, as you go to the public hospitals or public health centers, it is also a challenge to get.
I imagine it in this case that preventative medicine, and do you have a system of healthcare workers who go out into the community to offer vaccination programs or maternity care, for example?
Yes. Okay, so we have what we call a health surveillance assistants. So these are community health workers, and they're the ones that will go within communities and administer some of the services. Yeah, so the idea is that people should not cover long distances, but rather should be government coming to them. But it's just that sometimes, because of issues of financing, it is not possible for government to do the same unless there is a donor partner that is willing to support. So, for example, I've had maybe vaccination campaigns supported by UNICEF or by UNFPA. That has worked out very well. But then to have government to run its own campaigns, most of the times it's very difficult. Yeah, but the health workers are indeed there. They're available, but when they don't have the financial resources, they can't do much. When they have the financial resources, then they can do the work.
Through your work with in the political sphere, Maggie, what difference have female politicians made to the issues that you've raised here?
Yeah, all right. So I think maybe just to say that as Warwick, working together, Susan and other partners, we saw that.
Can you remind us again what WALREC is? The Women's Legal Resources
Women's
Centre.
Legal, exactly. Women's Legal Resources Center. Yeah, so one of the things that indeed made us to work with the women in parliament and in local government was the issue of them pushing issues for women. And one of the things that the Parliamentary Women's Caucus have done, of course, different ones, because they come and go. But in terms of pushing the legal framework, they have done it very well. Most of the laws that we are talking about, like the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, we have a Gender Equality Act, we have Marriage, Family Relations and Divorce Act, we have Deceased Wills and Inheritance Act. All these gender-related laws, they have gone through Parliament through the pushing of women in Parliament. So like there's debate in Parliament on a particular bill, women would stand up, raise their voice, talk about why it's important to have that law in place and all that. So we have seen women pushing laws like that. We have also seen women even raising issues during debate on issues that are affecting women. For example, gender-based violence, even access to affordable agriculture, fertilizer and all that. Those are some of the things that women have raised. Issues of sexual, reproductive health rights, women have raised the same in Parliament. Yeah, so we have seen them raising. And one of the things that we have also done is to ensure that we work with them closely so that they're able to have the right information which they can use in Parliament. So already as Warwick with other partners, we have started already working with the new parliament, the new parliamentary women's caucus, on how they can also raise issues in parliament. Apart from that, we have also reached out even to the Speaker of Parliament office and raised issues of concern as a women's movement. So of late, we have seen a lot of cases of women being murdered. We have raised that with Parliament as a women's movement. Through that, Parliament had committed itself that they are going to ensure that they're able to call upon security agencies and understand what is happening, understand how they're going to protect women. So when women cannot raise in Parliament themselves, as women's movement, we're also there to provide that backup support where we're able to raise more issues with the relevant authorities.
And it's the same story the whole world over. If you can improve women's education and women's chance in life, you improve life for everybody, don't you?
Yes. Okay, so one of the things that we're also trying to do as a women's movement is to document the cost-benefit analysis, to do a cost-benefit analysis. Because sometimes people don't understand why we have to push for gender equality. And for us, we are saying if there's gender inequality, there are more costs actually than benefits to the nation. So we are trying to do a cost-benefit analysis, which we want to present to government so that they understand to say, if you don't do gender, this is what you are losing out. Yeah. So as a simple thing, for example, just discussing sometimes with people from government, we tell them to say, for example, just look at gender-based violence. Yeah. When people are being affected by gender-based violence, it means that there will be need for government to provide more services, healthcare for women that are experiencing gender-based violence. But suppose you have intervened and then there's no gender-based violence. It means that the money that we are going to use for healthcare, for treating survivors of gender-based violence, will now be redirected to other things. So those are some of the conversations that we are already doing. And for us, we are saying, let's show out to the world, show out to the public officials to say, this is what you're losing out if you don't do interventions on gender.
So not content with setting up Woolrec, you've also set up the Women's Manifesto movement in Malawi. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Women's Manifesto movement came when I noted in 2018 that as women, as women's rights organizations, we're speaking about women's issues, but not from a united front. So it will be Maggie there speaking, another organization speaking, and all that. And then I started thinking to say, but if someone would just ask us to say, what are the issues for women? What are we going to be telling them? So that's when the idea now came to say, why can't we have a document that will contain the challenges that women are facing in Malawi and then the demands which they are making to government that they should be fulfilled. So now we started a process. So I reached out to fellow NGOs, both local and international NGOs, and shared this idea. And then it had a buy-in. And then we started now doing consultations. We did consultations in 12 districts as Warwick. So the consultations were done by Warwick, not with the other organizations. So when we did the consultations, we came up with an issues paper. And the issues paper showed so many challenges that women talked about in the northern Malawi, central Malawi, southern Malawi, young women, girls. So then when we did the issues paper, we now convened women, which we called Women's Assembly. So we had a Women's Assembly in November 2018. It brought in women from different angles, from private sector, public sector, from universities, from government, from everyone, from the rural areas. So we presented the issues to them, and then they validated to say, indeed, these are the issues that we think are critical for women, and we should be talking to government. So we came up with 11 thematic areas, including violence against women and girls, access to justice issues, issues of environment, so many issues. And then when we did that, when we validated, then later on we now developed the actual Women's Manifesto, the actual document. And then another thought that came to me was, in 2019, since we were going towards elections, we needed to now interface with the presidential candidates so that they already understood what women were saying. So then it became a political advocacy tool up to now. So that's what we've been using. So it's a document that any woman in Malawi can just take it and say, these are my issues and this is what I want government to do.
That's an inspirational idea. And And it echoes
Mhm.
a lot of what I think Susan will agree, what we've seen in recent years in this country, where women across political parties are pulled together for certain
Yes.
issues.
Uh-huh.
You've started that from the ground up. That's amazing.
Yes. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what strikes you about each other's countries when you visit back and forth. What are the things that you think, oh, it wouldn't be like this in Scotland, or it wouldn't be like this in Malawi? What are the key differences, do you think?
There are so many, so many differences. For me, I think one is the level of development, because I really believe that the level of development also helps in shaping the mindset of the people. Yeah. So I remember in 2014 when I first visited Scotland, I kept on asking Susan. I said, "How did it happen that you got so developed like this, and we are so far away?" Yeah, and then Susan would say, "No, it had to take years of planning, of discussing how we wanted things to run. It had to take years of demanding accountability, yeah, from our leaders." So for me, I think one is the level of development. That the level of development also shapes the mindset of the people, and that helps out. Also, participation of women in politics. We visited the parliament in Scotland, and recently I also visited parliament in London. So I saw that there's a large number of women participating in debates, in discussions, in shaping the country, which right now in Malawi we don't have. We have only 21% of the total population of people in parliament. 21% of 229, it's about 50 women. So we only have 50 women out of 229 in parliament. So that also affects even in terms of how women can raise their issues. They're already overpowered by the numbers. So for them to now go about and raising more issues for women, sometimes it's a challenge. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I saw.
What about you, Susan?
Hey, can I just say, Maggie, I know it's only 21% of female parliamentarians in the National Assembly. Your country, Malawi, has only had multi-party democracy for just over 30 years. It took us at least 100 years to get anywhere near, 40%. So I think in one generation, Malawi has made huge strides, far more than we did in Britain. The main difference between Malawi and Scotland or the rest of the UK is economic. I think it's as simple as that. We have different cultures, of course. Malawi is a much more church and faith is much more important to the people of Malawi. Britain is a much more secular nation now. But I'm here in the States, and United States, church and faith is very important here too. But I think it's the economic challenges that Malawi faces that holds back the development. So Maggie and her sisters are working with sometimes both hands tied behind their back, because simple things like trying to connect to the internet or finding enough fuel to go to meetings or airtime to make calls become huge issues. And as the world is so uncertain, as I said at the very beginning, it is countries like Malawi that suffer the most from the global uncertainty that we're going through. But the similarities are that when women work together, when young girls see other women, older women working together, then that inspires them, and that women working together can change the world. I think it's as simple as that, and as complicated as that.
It's a lovely note to pass across to Bex, I think. Women can change the world, Bex.
I love it. Perfect. So we come to our final question, which is the same in every episode, and that is, do you have a woman or women of the moment that you would like to give some flowers to?
Yes, for me, I think I would say two, actually. One at local level. That's our current Vice President, Dr. Jen Hansa. I really feel that given a chance, she can perform. Because when she went into government, it was clear that her agenda was to do away with corruption. And I think also that brought in a lot of a lot of challenges for her because people have also different ways of dealing with corruption. But she's a woman who, if given the chance, I believe she can take Malawi in the right direction. Another woman that I want to praise is the director of World Trade Center. She has gone into an area that I think ordinarily is male-dominated, but I think she has been able to deliver on her mandate. Thank you.
Lovely picks. And what about you, Susan?
I'm going to suggest every teenage girl in a village in Malawi that gets up in the morning without any breakfast, walks 5 miles to school, sometimes doesn't have any lunch, and then walks 5 miles back home again and still studies in the evening after her household chores. Because if you, as a young woman, want to be educated so much that you will walk 5 miles, 10 miles every day to learn, then you are quite simply a heroine. I mean, So to every little girl, every young woman who walks to school every day, whether in Malawi or any other country where women and girls still struggle to get a proper education.
I think those are all lovely picks. It's been such a lovely conversation and very eye-opening and interesting to hear about the difference between our countries and the history and hopefully the positive future for women and girls in Malawi. Thank you both very much.
I feel like we've only
Thank
really
you.
scratched the surface, haven't we? There's so much more we could find out. If people may listen to this and they may feel that rather than having a Christmas present or a birthday present, they'd like to donate to something, where would they donate to? Where would you suggest?
All right. I would still suggest girls' education, and that's in the rural areas. If it's big enough, maybe provide mobility for girls. If not possible, but just even the school supplies, that will help.
Okay. Well, we'll ask you when we put this out to send us a link, and we'll put it out in the
Yes,
we
can do that. Yeah, we can do that.
Perfect. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners. We really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep our channel growing and spread the word. Thank you.